Hey guys, it's your host Julian. This week I sit down with Paula Spence, the art director for Regular Show. We chat all things Regular Show, including JG coming to Paula to help out on the initial pilot, premiering it at Cartoon Network up on the roof while the sun is setting, and we get to hear what Paula originally thought Skip should look like. We hear a few SpongeBob stories, and so much more. If you're digging the podcast, make sure to leave us a 5-star review and rating, and enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to What's My Head podcast. I'm your host, Julian, and today I'm joined by Mrs. Paula Spence. Paula, how are you?
Hello. Good.
I am good. This is going to be a fun one because not only did you work on one of my favorite shows of all time, Regular Show, not only did we just have some talks about some unions, and I just started learning about some unions with the animation guilds, not only are you working in backgrounds, man, but we got so much shit to talk about tonight, Paula. Thank you for joining us. First things first, though, because I told you we'd open up the show with this one. When we had our little chat, you told me old Mr. JG Quintel came to you and said, hey, I got this idea called The Regular Show. It's for the pilot. I need your help. How did it go? How did that whole story play out? What was the skinny? Give us a skinny on it, Paula.
Yes. Okay. First of all, tell me if I go on too long. I
No such thing.
A lot. I love having days where I don't say a word, but if my stories get dragged out, my husband thinks I'm tell the stories that are way too long. Okay, so JG and I had worked together on a couple of shows before Regular Show. The first time I worked with him was on Camp Lazlo, and he was still at Cal Arts. And you know what JG looks like. He had short hair, and occasionally one time he came in and shaved it, no hair. And he got his driver's license picture taken like that. So I've seen him bald, but usually it's long, perfectly straight, very dark hair. So he was a storyboard revisionist on Lazlo, and I came on as a background designer. And then while we were working on Camp Lazlo, Thurup Van Orman was on the show as well, and he and JG had been friends at Cal Arts, and Thurup made the pilot for Flapjack while we were all on Lazlo together, and I helped Thurup with the background designs on that show. And then Flapjack got picked up, so several of us moved from Camp Lazlo onto Flapjack. I actually left the studio for a little while. That's when I took my first art director job. I was back at Nickelodeon. And then I came back to work on Flapjack. And at first I was just doing backgrounds, and we had a different art director that was put on the show to kind of bring, some maturity to the show because it was just Thurup, and JG was the creative director on that show. And I don't know if Cartoon Network thought the show was going to get made because everybody was so young. I was not as young, but I was doing backgrounds. And then we had Alex Kerwin on as the art director. He did not stay long. He was actually planning his wedding, and he had other opportunities that came up, and he ended up leaving the show. And Thurup told me that Alex quit last night. He told me, and I said, oh, can I have his job? And he's like, what? Do you want it? And I was like, of course I do. Yes. So I became the art director on Flapjack, and then JG and Thurup and I just, moved forward together on that show, which looked amazing, if I do say so myself. And while we were on Flapjack, that is when JG was pitching his idea. You and your fans probably know that Regular Show was born in JG's student films from Cal Arts, 2 in the AM PM and The Naive Man from Lollyland, I think it was called. And that's where we first see Pops. That's where we see Benson, and we don't see Mordecai and Rigby yet, but those characters make an appearance. So I had heard about JG when I was back over at Nickelodeon, and or before I ever worked with him. And so he was already making waves when he was in school. And he's just a lovely person. He's so fun and funny, and he is just really enjoying life. The way he moves through life is a reminder to all of us to just value what in the heck we have, what is going on around us, and to just take delight in things, small things. And so JG was pitching this show, and I didn't know about it because he's incredibly secretive. Like, JG told me once, while we were working on regular show, that he once got a camera, I think it was a video camera, from his parents. And he grew up in Central California. And I want to say he grew up on or near a farm. His dad did some farming, and he shared a bedroom with his brother. And he used to barricade himself inside of his bedroom because his brother could not get in. And he took that video camera and he shot some stop motion films with that video camera, but he would lock everybody out. Like, he just does not like to show his work while he's working on it. He loves to give people surprises. He gets a great deal of joy from working on his project and just like amusing himself, but knowing that he's going to make other people laugh. And I think that's why his projects are so successful, because he's amusing himself, and he just gets so much joy from not sharing that stuff. So it probably nearly killed him to have to come to me. But that made it all the more sweet when he approached me in my flapjack office and said, "Hey, I pitched my idea to Shorts at Cartoon Network, and they're going to do it, but I need help. And I know how to do my stuff, but I don't know how to do what you do. And I need your help to do it. Will you help me?" And I was like, hell yes. Oh my gosh, yes. So he showed me his project, and of course I loved it. But it's weird. And I was basically just seeing the storyboard. He may have had an animatic done by the time he brought it to me. But so JT had done the board. He had done all the writing himself, and then he had done the character designs and the props and effects. There are very few props and effects in that pilot, but one thing that he did was draw a Barcelona chair. You can Google that to see what that is. It is a very uncomfortable chair. Like, a real Barcelona chair is made of fine leather and good materials, and it's not super uncomfortable, but it's not really that comfortable. But a fake counterfeit Barcelona chair, like the one that JG actually had at one point in his life, is uncomfortable. I'm not sure where that chair is now, but I do know that there was a real chair that was very uncomfortable, and he does not have it anymore.
I hope it's in a museum somewhere.
So anyway, I knew how private JG was about his personal work at the time, and we talked about it, like, don't tell anybody. And so our process was, we'd both be working on Flapjack during the day, and then he'd stop by, at lunchtime or after work, sometimes before work, and I'd show him what I was working on. And the first thing that I drew for the pilot was that house. And it was based on this really small, it was a digital image, but it was really small, low res, grainy shot of a craftsman house. And I think it came from some real estate magazine or something. And I started drawing that house, and just roughing it out to get the main design. And then when you're doing something like a short, you kind of don't have that much time to do it. And it's a skeleton crew. It was me and JG, although we had one other artist who did the cleanup on JG's designs, like the characters and props.
Do you remember the artist's name?
Yes, his name is Eric Elizares, and he also worked with us on Camp Laszlo, and I think he was on Flapjack. If he may have been at the beginning, and then he was on Flapjack. Yes, Eric Elizares.
Shout out to Eric.
He's great.
Yeah.
He is, I think, working as a character and prop designer. Maybe he still does cleanup. Fun fact, I, as recording secretary at the Animation Guild, I get to sign new member applications. And a few weeks ago, I got this application and it was Christian Elizares. And I thought, what? Holy shit. This guy's kid has now grown up and joined the Animation Guild, and makes me smile to think
That's
of
really cool.
like he's starting his own animation legacy. But I've been working with Eric for a long time. I haven't worked with him recently, but that was when I first started working with him. It was like 2004, I think. Mm-hmm. Okay, so JG would come to my office, and we got the design for the house down, and then we had to figure out a line style for drawing that background and other backgrounds. I got it right. So I was aware of Ronald Searle's artwork, and I'm like, oh, so you want to ink? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, he draws in ink and like crow quill pen and splatters, and not like Ralph Steadman, but Ronald Searle. And so I did a bunch of drawings with different kinds of ink pens, like a fountain pen and a crow quill pen and my favorite pen in the world, this Pentel Stylo fountain pen, which is felt tip. And I did probably 5 or 6 ink drawings of that house and with the surrounding park. And he's like, not quite. And I'm like, you're talking about Ronald Searle though. And he brought a book in and showed it to me. And I'm like, are you joking? Like, you can flip through this entire book, and almost every single piece of art in this Ronald Searle book is drawn with ink, except for 2 drawings that are like in the middle of the book, and they're talking about his time in a POW camp. And he has saved these couple of drawings that survived. He was in a camp similar to the one in the bridge on the River Kwai, and was not able to, he didn't have the usual drawing materials, pen and paper, and who knows what he was drawing with, like a nail dipped in coffee or, blood. I don't know what he was drawing with, piece of bamboo. Whatever the case, they were lovely little drawings of just the room that he was imprisoned in. And there's a cot and there's something hanging on the wall. And I do not know why JG was absorbed with those drawings, except I figured it out, during the pilot stage and during my long time working with JG, is he just wanted it to look like a room that you were in, and you like somebody's sketchbook. Somebody drew this scene, quietly and not obtrusively. And so I'm like, well, those look like, why don't I draw it with pencil? Or I could draw it with a different color ink, or I could change the ink color, on the computer. I could draw it digitally. What I ended up doing was then drawing it with a bunch of other implements, like a Tombow pencil 3B. That's my favorite. And all these different, pencils, colored pencils. And JG always picked the most boring thing that I did. And I was like, are you sure? Are you sure that's going to be okay? And he's like, yes, trust me, it's perfect. So we went with a pencil line, and it was my Tombow. I drew with the 3B. Other people, I don't know if they were drawing with Tombows, but I don't know why anybody would draw with something that wasn't a Tombow graphite pencil. But anyway, we got the drawing style down then, and then he wanted watercolor paintings. And we talked a lot about that because I have a deep background with watercolor paintings. And there was a short that had been done at Cartoon Network years before this by Aaron Springer called Periwinkle.
Mm-hmm.
And they did watercolor backgrounds for those short. I think it was maybe 3 shorts. And they were lovely. And I was like, oh, do you want them to be washy or whatever? It was really hard for me to get from JG what he wanted, because he saw it in his mind, but he didn't know how to describe it. And then I started doing all kinds of paintings, like, ooh, let me do a beautiful painting of this house with this pencil line. And I did several paintings. And then he showed me a website, or he showed me the website of a fellow CalArts artist. I'm not going to say the name because I'm going to say something rude about it, the artwork in a moment. And I hope they never find out that I insulted the artwork, not on purpose, but but they did end up working. They worked in our orbit at that time. And I looked at the website and I go, oh, you want bad watercolor drawings? Is that it? And he goes, what? And I go, you'd like them to have a more naive style and blah, blah, blah. Whatever talk I was attaching to these paintings or any kind of paintings did not matter. That was not what was registering with JG. He just liked the way they looked, but it did help me to see those paintings, and they weren't bad. They were not the most expert of watercolor paintings, and they definitely had a specific style and a great deal of charm. So that is what I tried to do in the next round of options for JG, and he liked it. So that's how we got the style of the show, with that little struggle through the background design and the cleanup line and then the paintings. And for the first couple of seasons, I painted the pilot on watercolor paper, and I came up with this technique we need to make it practical. As an art director, I need to make sure that this is actually reproducible and it's going to be a doable style for the show. So what I did was rough things out. I did a cleanup line that was scanned, and then I printed out those BGs. We call backgrounds BGs in animation, so I'm going to continue calling them BGs. I printed out those BGs through the photocopier on watercolor paper. Not the greatest watercolor paper. It was Arch's 80-pound cold press, and that's quite rough, and I don't in particular like that texture, but I painted on many different papers for JG, and that's the one he liked the best. And it has a very watercolory texture. So that's the way I painted the pilot, and that's the way I wanted everybody to paint on the first season. But what I realized soon after starting the first season is that the 2 guys that I hired to paint did not paint with watercolors. So we figured it out. We worked our way through the first season, but so that was how the backgrounds got developed. JG didn't have anything spectacularly weird in mind for the painting the characters, props and effects. But I knew that Rigby was a raccoon.
Yeah.
And I knew that Mordecai is a scrub jay, which we have in California all over. They're rude birds. And I just started coloring things in, and JG would come. We had, by that point, we had finished background paintings. We had the painting of the house, and then we had a drawing and painting of the kitchen, which is where a lot of the action takes place in the pilot. That kitchen is my kitchen.
Really?
It's based on my kitchen. And I have these kind of golden plywood cabinets that were put in the 50s. My house is quite old. It's going to be 100 years old in a couple of years, but the kitchen was put in the 50s. So I went with that look because it's familiar to me. And this is something that JG does in his own work, you know, kind of using locations that are in his life, you know, or familiar to him. And so I drew the kitchen and painted it. I don't have striped wallpaper like they do in regular show, but I do have pink walls. So we had that kitchen background, and I started painting the characters. And then we came to one meeting where JG and I were looking at Pops and Benson and Skips. And I had painted Skips black because he was clearly a gorilla.
Yeah.
And JG said, what if? And he had this huge smile on his face, and it was clearly just not what he expected to see. And I found out why, because he had something else in mind. But he said, what if we painted him white with like flesh color on his chest and his face? And I'm like an albino gorilla? And he goes, or like a Yeti. And I was like, is that what he is? Like, I had no clue. He's a Yeti. So while we were sitting there and I'm laughing about this, and JG's laughing because I was so dumb, I didn't, realize he was a Yeti, and I didn't ask. I just painted him black, which I think I still have a copy of that black Skips somewhere, because the moments that ensued were part of the biggest laugh, one of the biggest laughs that I've ever had in my life, of just coloring Skips, changing the colors on Skips while sitting there with JG and just chatting away, and click, 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 he was changed. And I just started laughing so hard. It was so funny to me because I had been so wrong about that character. And I think I was crying. I know I was crying with laughter because it looked so funny to me. And everybody knows Skips from, regular show. And of course he looks like that. Why would you think anything else? But for me, having seen him in a different way and then seeing him in his true form, that's just one of the best moments I've ever had in my life. Was just, that sounds pathetic, but it was just one of the biggest laughs that I've ever had. Just being there with JG, who was enjoying it so much, just seeing me wake up to Skips and get so much pleasure out of how hilarious it was. Oh, a great moment. So I will shorten this story. I feel like I've gone on forever, but that was near the end of our development for that show. But I will tell you, I was really worried about the way that show looked. And because at the time this short was part of a group of shorts, a shorts program called Cartoon Institute. And at the time, they were putting artwork up on the walls. So you walk down to where the shorts department was stationed, and there was a big bulletin board, and it would say works in progress. And there were all these other projects. Like, I think that there may have been a Craig McCracken project. I'm not sure. There was a Dave Smith project. There were several projects that had like a very design heavy Cartoon Network style, like at the time it was a kind of Cartoon Network look, and there were the backgrounds were amazing and the characters were amazing, and they're all shown on the bulletin board separate. And I was just worried that what we were doing was not going to be enough to compete with those shows. They weren't putting it up on the wall. That may very well have been because JG didn't want people to see it, because he does like to keep things quiet and hidden until they're ready to reveal in full form. And so that was when JG told me it's called Regular Show for a reason. And I just want my show to look like everybody's boring life. And he wanted people to be able to imagine themselves in this world. Like, I don't know how to describe it because I'm not in JG's head, but he did a wonderful job explaining it to me. Well, like why he wanted it to look so boring and to get people. That's even part of what happens with the opening credits, which, as you know, it starts out with this kind of funny tone, and then you hear like a clock ticking to set the stage for some boring life. But that's meant to be like, well, a clock ticking, but also a channel changing. And I think JG's wish was to have kids flipping the channel and come across Regular Show and get pulled in. And so, end of very long story. There was a night when they showed all the shorts in Cartoon Institute. So I don't know how many were on the slate. It had to be at least 10. And they did it up on the roof at the top of Cartoon Network. And it was a really weird format because they had us all kind of sitting at these weird angles to each other. We were sitting in rows, but there were TV screens all around us, almost like we were sitting in groups that were back to back, and everybody was looking out at the screens around them. And they started showing the shorts before sundown. The sun was still up. We were up on the roof outside, 3 stories up or 4 stories up in Burbank. And they showed the shorts in kind of like a hierarchical order, like whoever the most well-known creator was, they showed them in order. And they showed 3 or 4 shorts, and I was like, oh my God, like they were hard to watch. They were loud. The characters were screaming. It was, and they were too designed. It was too much having all that much design on the screen, when the backgrounds look amazing and then the characters are on top of them. It's hard to look at it and see what you're meant to be seeing. And then Regular Show started. It was like the 4th or 5th short, and that dumb noise comes on and the ticking, and we see the house, and I just relaxed in my chair and I thought, this is fucking going to work. Oh my God. And 2 seconds in, everybody was laughing. They hadn't really been laughing before. And this show came on, and it was so relaxing and it was so mellow. And then these idiot characters fighting over this stupid chair and playing rock, paper, scissors. It was so dumb. And it worked. it was the first moment of the night when people were just laughing and getting joy out of it. And it was just JG on the screen. It was so great. And then I think the next short was Uncle Grandpa, which got another huge laugh when that toilet monster came out of the toilet. It got some good laughs too, but they ended up picking up regular show after that. And they did pick up a form of Uncle Grandpa. It became Secret Mountain Fort Awesome at first, which was that toilet monster and the creeps that came out of the toilet. And then they went back to Uncle Grandpa, which I'm thankful for because I love that show. So, but that is the story of regular show from my perspective. I'm sure JG has a totally different story, but I am going to be endlessly honored that I was pretty much the only one that got to work with JG on that pilot. And it took a little while for that show to get picked up and for them to start making it. One more fun story about the pilot time. I started working on the backgrounds and then I had a vacation planned. This is like September of 2008. And I went to Borneo for 2 weeks with a couple of my friends. Borneo. It is almost all the way to Australia. It's in the South China Sea. It's the biggest island after Australia, I think, and Greenland. Greenland gets to be a continent, right? Australia is a continent, but anyway, it's a big island, and it's made up of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei. And you go to Borneo, and you just are there in nature. And oddly enough, and it's not that odd, but tourists are not allowed to just run rampant on Borneo, and you have to have a local guide there when you're going to go do something like visit a national park. And so we had these tours set up, and we would be with these groups of people from day to day, like, oh, we're with these 3 people for 2 days, and then we're going to go off into the rainforest and be with another group of people. And we were with this couple, me and my 2 friends. We were with this couple who was he was from England and she was from Sweden or Norway, and they had been married for a year, and they were, just traveling in Borneo like we were. But one of them was sick. And so we were spending, I think it was the husband who was sick, and we were spending time with the wife. And then he got better, and we were at this like rainforest resort. It wasn't much of a resort. It was a retreat. There were bugs everywhere and swimming giant pigs. And anyway, it was a retreat in the jungle. And we spent a couple of hours in the car with this couple going to our next location. And we came across some baboons in the forest. I thought we were going to get our faces ripped off. Anyway, we got to our next location and we were just chatting with them. And then we started chatting about, he asked, where we came from, and we were from LA. And he said, oh, I travel to LA like every month or so. And I said, oh, you must work in the entertainment industry. And he goes, yeah, I do. I work in animation. I go, you do? And he goes, yeah, I work at Cartoon Network. And I was like, what? And he thought he was hot stuff because I was this big fan, like so impressed that he works at Cartoon Network. And I'm like, I work at Cartoon Network. Well, he works at Cartoon Network London. And so then it was like, oh, well, we got to talk about business. And the first thing out of his mouth is, do you know JG Quintel? He has this really funny short that he's working on. And I'm like, what? I'm working on it. Like and need to get back to it. As soon as I'm back from Borneo, I'm going. So that was crazy. It's a very small world.
Well, if it's any consolation, I think it was my second deployment. I'm on an aircraft carrier, and with the aircraft carriers, when you deploy and you got the entire detachment on, there's 5,500 people. It's a floating city. The
Yeah.
most miserable experience ever. You go and watch Top Gun Maverick. They make it look really, really cool and really, really fun. There's nothing fun about jets landing right on top of where you sleep and keeping you up all night. But I
Oh,
digress. I'm walking in the hangar bay. Like I said, there's 5,500 people. When I was and I graduated in 2008, so I had long hair, right? Long red hair. So I was very recognizable out in the wild, right? But when you get in the military, you kind of have to shave your head and you have to keep it clean. So I've got that on. I've got a uniform on. I've lost weight at that point. I've got a hat on. And this guy sees me and he walks up. I'd never met him in my life before. And he's like, "Is your brother Nathan?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" And he was like, "Did you go to Pine Ridge?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" And he was like, "Did you play on this basketball team?" I was like, "Yeah, why?" And he was like, "Oh, me and your brother were really good friends. I'm such and such." And I wish I could remember his name. And I was like, "I'm sitting here in the middle of the
which ocean?
Arabian Sea, and this guy walks up and he joined the Navy. I joined the Navy. We're on the same ship together, thousands of miles away. It's so weird, you know. Um,
It is a small world.
it really is. And going back to you guys all sitting up on that rooftop, I got to imagine you and the guys at least talked about it after, right? After they showed the short, nobody was really laughing at the the beginning of the shorts and stuff. But what was it like, or what was what was the feeling like? What was the vibe like after you guys got done watching that short?
I mean, I told you when as soon as it started, I felt relief.
Mhm.
Like, oh my God. Because I was actually I was worried it wasn't going to be impressive enough. And I was a little worried that it wasn't going to work. And I'll be honest, I was a little worried that I wasn't making it look as great as like, oh my God, am I going to be embarrassed because this looks
Mhm.
like trash? And it didn't look like trash, but I was relieved mostly to just, oh my God, I'm sorry, you're getting a Siamese
Oh
nose
no,
in
you're fine.
your
You're fine.
camera. Um, I was relieved that it it was going to work. And there is a huge part of me that thought that little punk was right. He knew, like, he knew that that's what he wanted, and he was going to stand by it. And that is something very special about JG. He has that vision and he knows it's good.
Mhm.
And it's very natural to him because it's based in his reality. A lot of his projects, if not all of his projects, are based on his own life. Those characters, like, I'm not sure if he did work in a gas station. Maybe he did. He probably did. I heard about other places that he worked and other jobs that he did, and many of those moments appeared in regular show. And Close Enough, that is JG, that Josh character. It looks like him.
Yeah.
Mordecai is JG as well. But the characters in Close Enough they're based on him and his wife and his friends. And that house is a real house on Berendo Street in Silver Lake. It's a real house. And there are still people that worked in animation living in it. JG lived in it for a while. Penn Ward lived in it. And I don't know who else lived in it. So many people lived in that house. And the owner of the house rents it out, and he likes the people that have moved in and out, and they'll like sublease. But JG lived in the house for a while. I'm pretty sure it has some wild wallpaper in the kitchen. I don't know if you've ever noticed the wallpaper in the kitchen on Close Enough, but I was like, no, dude, we cannot do white and red wallpaper. It is not going to work. But he showed me the real wallpaper, and I was like, wow,
This shit
well,
works.
but this is a cartoon, and we have to have, the characters visible, and like, can we tweak it? And I did end up convincing him to make it yellow and white. So it's much harder to see the pattern, but it's much easier to see the characters on the backgrounds. So there's a lot of his real life in there. And because he gets so much joy out of his own life, like taking the joy from regular life, he's able to translate that to other people. He sees the fun in life, and I think it really helps other people to see the fun in life too. And JG, what his reaction was, who's to say, because he's in his own mind. But all I know is I have in my mind what JG looks like when he's happy and he's succeeded. And it's like this. It's JG with a big smile going, like nodding and like, yeah, like he's taking it in. He's taking in like your reaction to see that you're pleased. And I was like, I told him after the shorts, aired, it was like, you were right, that it looks great. I was so relieved in more ways than one. I just relieved, the pressure was off, and I was enjoying this short that I wasn't feeling that for the other shorts. And that's totally rude to those people, but
No,
regular show was a better short. I don't mean to be rude. They were good too, but they just weren't as enjoyable to me as JG's. And I think probably that was the general feeling because his show got picked up, and JG succeeded, and he enjoys making people laugh. And so he knew that he had succeeded, and he was happy.
Well, I told you before, before we hit record, I told you on the phone, I was done with animation. If it wasn't for regular show, I don't get back into animation. I mean, I deployed so much, and I was taken away from my oldest son now, so much. And then it was just us channel flipping. And then him seeing it, saying, stop. We watched it. We bonded over this show. It's just, there's something special about regular show.
There is.
I can't put my finger on it. Like when you think about it, you explain to somebody what the show is about. It's a raccoon, it's a bird, they're best friends. There's more mullets and El Caminos than I've ever seen anywhere. And I live in the South. El Caminos and mullets are standard issue down here. So it's like I said, you try to explain something and you can't really capture the essence. I have to show them, right? I have to show them why this is special, and then I have to tell them why I'm so attached to this show.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, there's something about it that it's got the it factor. Right.
It does. JG has the it factor too.
Absolutely. Like I said, on paper, it's just like none of this shit makes sense. What the fuck? A squirrel or not a squirrel, excuse me, a raccoon. I'm sorry, Bill. A raccoon and a fucking bird are not gonna like each other. And there's a gumball that loses his shit. There's a Yeti that's magical. There's a baby in diapers that is essentially the council, the guardians. It's just like all of this crazy wild shit is just coming out of the sky. And like obviously animation is very collaborative, but it's just like it has to have a seed somewhere, and JG is that seed. And like I said, just understanding and seeing like what you guys did and how you guys did what you did, and you had to really make a lot of stuff come together for this show to happen. Now, when that's all done airing, like I said, you've already watched all those ones. Obviously, regular show is the best one on that one. Do you guys know at that point in time, like this is going to go to series now, or is
we made the pilot, so that was 2008. We were making the pilot. Probably they might have shown it at the end of 2008 or some point in 2009. And then the network takes the time that they need to make their decisions. It can be a quick decision or it can be a longer one. um, and you've talked to a lot of people that have stuff in development, and sometimes it goes on for a long time.
Oh yeah.
But I think they were pretty sure. The fact that I had somebody from Cartoon Network London telling me about this amazing short that was being worked on at my studio, and I was like, I'm on it. So that tells you that how special that particular short was. So I'm pretty sure that they thought they had something good. And there's an investment for them, obviously, in hiring a crew and making the deal with an overseas studio to make this show. And, you know, there's a certain cost for every episode. So they don't take that on lightly. But, and they didn't, like I said, pick up anything else at the time. You know, a little bit after we started working, they started on Uncle Grandpa or Secret Mountain Fort Awesome. And then, you know, that one kind of faltered a little bit and they ended up going back to Uncle Grandpa. But I don't know. They take the time that they need, but I think that they did know this is special. But you know, we had also done Flapjack, and Cartoon Network at the time, and for a long time, I don't know if it's the case very much anymore, but for a long time it was a creator driven show, you know, or studio. So they had shows like, you know, Time Squad. They were very different shows, as you know, and
Absolutely.
Powerpuff and Samurai Jack and Dexter's Lab and all of those shows were, you know, really creator driven by these kind of auteurs of animation, all very different in style, but they kind of let those guys go and do their things with their crews. And the best experiences, I think, on those projects, I know on the projects I was on, was when the whole crew was in tune with the creator. On Flapjack, it was a little wild, you know. Thurup is an adventurer and, you know, he's hard to keep up with. I always say, like, I ate a lot of granola bars at my desk for lunch, you know, while there was shit going on around me. I was trying to like rein things in. But I don't want to downplay how difficult it is to make animation and successfully, and that the crew loves working on and the fans love watching. But with JG, he has such a strong vision and is able to tell you, you know, it was a little difficult working on the pilot to get his vision out of him, but once I knew him better and understood how to ask for things and what, you know, what kinds of questions to ask to find out what I needed to know. It's kind of easy for people to get in tune with JG because there's nothing hidden and it makes sense. Like now I mentioned before that there was one background designer that I had to kind of like try to rein in and get him to understand that it's called regular show for a reason. Like those backgrounds on that show are boring, you know,
really
when you
like
compare them to other shows. Like they don't have these dynamic, like woo up shots for the most part. It's a regular person's point of view standing in front of the house or the, you know, video rental store or whatever, the gym. And there isn't a lot of dynamic stuff going on with the backgrounds, and that is setting the tone for you to just be mellow and watch it, and then you can you can kind of become one with those characters and enjoy it all the more when crazy shit goes down, you know, when stuff goes weird. Then you can really go weird with it. So I think with JG, he has such a clear vision and is able to share it with people. And those of us who, not everybody was, working that closely with JG, but they're, my team is mostly working with me, but of course, with the freedom to talk to JG or ask him questions about what he wanted. But as I would try as much as I could to share that vision with them, and hopefully they would get on board. And one person in particular who has an affinity for, JG's shows is Jessica Yost, and she was with us also from Laszlo. She was actually a PA on that show. And then when Thurup did his short for his pilot for Flapjack, she did the color design. And then she came on to Flapjack as the color stylist, it's now called color designer. And she knows those guys, they have the same circle of friends. I don't know if she went to CalArts. I don't think so, but they have the same group of friends, and she and I worked very closely together. And she was able to absorb, JG's vision, and like same thing with Flapjack. She was spot on with what Thurup wanted for his show, but with JG, it was a natural fit as well, and she could, she and I would joke about, like, she might say, hey, there's a van in this show. Do you know what color JG's dad's van was? Or whose van is this? And I'd go, oh, okay, I'll ask, or whatever. It's because, like, anytime like a car would show up, like there was this, I can't even remember what episode it was. And it was the El Camino, I think. No, it wasn't. It was like a Trans Am or something. A Camaro. It was a Camaro. And
go back in time and win it, or they get flash forwarded back in time as the radio.
I think so. And oh no, not that one. Not that one. The El Camino is my God, why am I not remembering his name? I can't remember that character's name right now. He's kind of a Ziggy Stardust guy, but
not Death. Is it Death? I know who you're talking about because he's got the stars for the eyes, and my mind's blanking too. He's got the Robo Arm. He tried to arm wrestle.
I feel like his name's Gary.
I know you're talking about. He's got white El Camino. Fans are gonna roast the fuck out of us for this
that
one.
Was definitely an El Camino. But there was a Camaro being driven very fast, and Jessica colored it, the way she felt like it should be colored. It was driving on grass and the path in the park. And JG goes, oh no, that car's supposed to be red because that's what color my mom's car was. My mom's Camaro was. And we were like, oh, of course, why didn't we know that? So Jessica and I enjoyed through the years, like doing shorthand by just saying, hey, can you ask him what color, whatever was. And it's usually, based on JG's vision and memory. Jessica, by the way, I have a story that you will enjoy. We went once during one of the later seasons to Comic-Con in New York, and occasionally, like, JG's got a lot on his plate, and he actually, during the course of regular show, had 2 kids and a third, I think, during Close Enough. But he at this particular year didn't have the time to go to Comic-Con in New York, and they had asked me to go. And I think that was when I was on a panel with Sam Marin, who plays many of the characters, and a bunch of other people were on the panel. And anyway, I was going to New York, and Cartoon Network was putting me up in a hotel room, and Jessica was like, oh my God, that's so cool. I wish I could go to New York. And I was like, do you want to come? Like, you can come, like, crash in my room. I don't care. And she's like, yes, let's do it. So she came, And she and I went one night to the top of the Rock, Rockefeller Center. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's like 85 stories or something. And you pay to go up in a very fast elevator that has kind of a like light show in it. At the top of there's lights all over and a glass ceiling in the compartment that you're riding up in. And then you get to hang out up at the top of the observation decks. But we got in there, and Jessica and I were with a group of, I don't know, it was maybe like 6, 8, 10 other people. It's a big elevator. And I don't think any of them spoke English. They seemed to be from probably China. And the elevator started going up, and Jessica and I were having a good time. And all of a sudden we go, whoa, and we start doing Mordecai and Rigby's whoa. And every fucking person on that elevator joined us and was like, whoa, and waving hands and having a grand old time. And when we got up to the observation deck, everybody just had a good laugh and strolled off, and a great night. And that reminded me of you and your son. Yeah. That is just a stupid universal gesture that is still being done across the world. And that makes me happy.
Like I said, it's this one is like I said, it's a special show. It'll go down as one of those shows that I can forget so much. I'll forget birthdays, I'll forget Christmases, I'll forget whatever it is. I will never forget the show, the connection I had with my kid,
right.
The laughs we had just from this. Like I said, it's something more than just a cartoon for me. So like I said, I'm always grateful when I have any of you folks that have worked on this show. You guys did something real special for me, and I can never say thank you enough.
You are welcome, and thank you.
Thank you. So sticking with the regular show just for a little while, man. One episode in particular, and I never do this because it's hard to remember what you did last week. What you had for breakfast last week, right? However, this episode is, in my opinion, the best episode. Baby ducks, and I got to talk to
the baby ducks. Send them to the moon.
I'm going to tell you this story. I don't think I've told this one on the podcast yet, but so I've been a huge fan of ducks, birds. They're such a fascinating animal, right? I had a little cockatiel when I was younger. I named him Nacho because I was a fat kid. And his cheeks looked like nacho cheese.
Oh.
I always wanted a pigeon. Mom said no on pigeons. So pigeons went to a cockatiel, and I was like, man, one day I'm going to get a duck. So flash forward. It was like 2016, 2017. It's about right when I got out of the military, maybe a year after. And there's a tractor supply store or whatever those are, where you can go and buy like horse food, hay, and all that other shit. Yeah. And we're in there, and then I hear them chirping. Like it's yeah. They got baby ducks and they have chickens, and they have baby chickens, they have baby ducks. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go buy a baby duck. And then they have a strict no return policy. So my wife is with me and my oldest kid is with me. So I know if I buy the duck, she can't say no because I can't return it. So this is the thoughts I have in my head.
Were they yellow?
Yes. They were really baby ducks. They definitely needed an incubator and all that other stuff. They were little hatchlings and stuff, right? So I was like, oh, I'm going to get a duck. So I look at Katie. I'm like, hey, I think we need such and such. Can you go grab, that? I'm going to go over here and grab this. So I instantly go to the lady. I'm like, hey, look, I need to buy a duck. Right. She's like, okay, cool. And then this lady would not shut the fuck up. I'm like, and I'm looking at her, and she's going and going and going and going. I'm like looking over my shoulder. I'm just waiting for my wife to pop up. And I literally stop her mid-sentence. She's a very nice lady, but she just wouldn't shut the fuck up. And I was like, look, I am trying to buy this duck. And if my wife gets up here, so why the fuck do you got a duck? And I'm like, Susan, I told you this was going to happen. Now I have to go put the baby duck there. So I never got to buy the baby duck because my wife popped up right before I could hit swipe. And I looked at the lady, I was like, God damn it, I almost had a duck. But nonetheless,
what a bummer.
Yes, I wanted to teach it karate all because of it. And I'm an adult. This is a kid thoughts and kid theories. Only kids should be trying to teach fucking ducks karate. However, That episode is so fucking fun from start to finish. I talked with Bill. I talked about it with Toby, and I had Matt Price on a couple years ago. He's a writer. I'm pretty sure
Oh,
Matt. Uh, Sadly, I could never release that episode because that was on a laptop that was stolen in college.
oh,
Yeah, so there's like 5 or 6 episodes that I got out there. If you're listening in person that took my laptop, release those episodes for me. But
oh.
yeah, so he's going to come back on down the road though. So, but every time I've had somebody on this working on a regular show, I've brought baby ducks up. Did you get to work on that one by chance?
Sorry.
Did you get to work on that one by
Oh
chance?
God, I worked on every episode. There's
Oh,
no episode of regular show that I did not work on. Have you ever seen the crew shirt we did for our first season?
I have not.
Oh my God. Oh, I wish I could have been wearing it if it still fits. But it is a scene from that episode, and it's all of the characters in the golf cart, like totally stretched and freaking out. And there's just like stars streaming by,
Yeah.
and it's a space background. It's on a black t-shirt, but basically it's stars streaked in the background and all of those characters on the golf cart, like
Yeah.
going back to Earth, you know, it's so good. And it just says regular show, crew season 1. And then on the back, it's does it I think it has the whole cruise, all of the cruise names.
Yeah.
But there it's like a concert tee on the back with
Oh, that's
everybody's
so cool.
names. I gotta dig it up and make sure what it says on the back. It's a good shirt.
Absolutely. Sounds like it. Speaking of backgrounds for just a second, the space background is hands down my favorite backgrounds in the entire show. There's something so fun about that because it like if and it's probably just the weed. So when this show is a great show to sit there and smoke a joint, to eat way too many edibles and just absorb into the couch, right? It's so fun, and I love the space. Anytime I'm seeing stars shoot, because it's just something fun. Like I go out in here and do it. I'll sit out my front porch, and then I'll sit in my rocking chair and I just look up, and I love hearing the bats. I love hearing them go back and forth. They're like little acrobats too.
Yep.
And then usually on a nice clear night, you can see a lot of stars and constellations. So I love the space backgrounds in this show. But keeping it on the
That
baby
is
ducks. What's
that
that?
is great to know. And
Yeah.
the first space background got created for the pilot for the
Mhm.
card, the title card, and it is like 6 different watercolor washes. Like I made all these watercolor washes, which I still have scanned, and they're layer upon layer and they're inverted. And I've done all this like crazy stuff sitting there with JG, who's like,
Yeah.
okay, try this. And I'm like, all right, well, here it's inverted and it's getting really dark. And that's how we created. I usually got to create those kind of like space things in
Yeah.
color cards and stuff. And I love doing it. And I think of JG every time I do it still, like working on Little Demon, I did several backgrounds like that. And I just I think of JG while I'm doing it and just have fun. Like, I'll try this stupid shit. Something's gonna come of it, and they look great. So thank you for appreciating that.
Oh, it's no problem. Like I said, I haven't had anybody that's worked specifically on backgrounds. So the last couple of years that, like I said, I told you before we hit record, it's just backgrounds have been I don't know what it is. It's like you're supposed to enjoy the entire show in its entirety, but it's just like I mean, I guess you can find that with anything because you guys are drawn to specific, no pun intended, you're drawn to specific aspects of your job, whether it's voice acting, whether it's storyboarding, whether it's in betweening cleanup, background paint, whatever it is. You guys are, drawn to what you like, and it just happens to be backgrounds for me. I mean, it's just I think it all just started with comic books, like looking in the background, seeing, what's back there, what they hide, somebody's date or somebody's name, somebody's initials,
Yeah.
so shit like that. It's like finding little Easter eggs. And I really like that. Speaking of Easter eggs, did you get to put anything in there? Like I ask people all the time, specifically, did you get to throw anything that's personal to you into the
Of
show?
course. Yep.
Yeah.
I think everybody did at some
Yeah.
point. But for me, here's what it is. Now you've seen a couple of creatures coming in here.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one of them.
Okay.
This one didn't appear in regular show because she's was born after regular show was done. But this started in my career, my animation career on SpongeBob, I got a couple of kitties. My first kitty cats I got when I was on SpongeBob. And there's an episode of SpongeBob where Patrick and SpongeBob have to go and paint Mr. Krabs' house. And
Yes.
then when they get there, like there's all these pictures on the wall. And I had to put something in every one of those frames and like make it look good. Like he's got anchors, he's got lots of money imagery, and my cats Egbert and Clovis appeared on Mr. Krabs' wall, these two little kitties. And then they appeared in an episode of Invader Zim in the very same way. Like if I have an opportunity to put, I like putting artwork up on my walls, you can see. And off in front of me that you can't see, there are a million more pictures, including one of a cat. And my cats usually appear in every show. And on regular show, all of my cats appeared. So you may remember that Benson, and when we go to his house, he has quite a few cats on his wall. So I slipped in Egbert and Clovis, again, those same cats that had been on SpongeBob and Invader Zim, and they were, no doubt they were in Flapjack as well, but those cats were, one of them was gone, but they made it onto regular show. And then something, I think in the writer's room, they had seen that Benson had some cats on his wall, and they wrote it into an episode where he was just turning into the biggest loser, and he had multiple cat images on his walls. So all of my cats went into that episode, and I stupidly did not tell my background designer or the painter. I did the drawings, but I didn't tell the painter the way the cats should look. Mm-hmm. So when he painted them, I was like, oh shoot, I gotta have you repaint these because here's the cats. So they all got repainted. I think I might have painted one or two of those backgrounds in that episode, but I can't even remember what the heck that episode was called. But they all appear in Benson's house, and JG knows it. I didn't want to try to slip anything weird in, but since the writers were the ones that wrote that episode and specifically requested that he would have pathetic cat pictures on his wall, I was like, these are going to be my cats. And Thurup knew that I had cats. I don't like being known as a crazy cat lady. I actually like dogs better than cats. People don't believe it, but I have cats because they are easy for someone working in animation to take care of. They don't care when I'm gone all day, and I don't know, they could live without me. But Thurup had an episode with a crazy cat lady with a million cats on Flapjack, and that character looks an awful lot like me. It is me. So that's the only time I've ever been in an episode. Was I
you get any residuals for that episode?
That oh my gosh, I don't remember what that name of that episode was. It was in the last season that we did of SpongeBob or Flapjack.
You might have to reach out to him and see if you can get a residual check there. If
I didn't do the voice, and I don't know. She probably had a few small lines, and probably Thurup did her voice.
Yeah. Now, I remember that episode of SpongeBob because at the end, I learned so much as a kid, and I equate that into my adult life. And then for the longest time, because at the end of that episode with SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs is laughing, and then spit is what takes off all of the paint.
That's right.
Right. So when I was younger, my mom would never let me help paint because she was always like, no, you'll hit the baseboards. No, you'll hit the crown molding. You'll hit this, you'll hit that. It's an adult job. So that translates into my adult life. And there's a couple things that you learn how to do pretty efficiently when you get into the Navy. You know how to sweep and mop very well. You can be a top-notch janitor anywhere if you get out. You know how to paint. And we have this saying in the Navy, it was like once for dust. So you paint one time for dust and you paint twice for rust, right? So you have to go back over it the second time. So one of my last jobs when I was in shore duty up in Norfolk, Virginia, I had to paint the command master chief's office. And a master chief is the highest rank on the enlisted side. So, and he was the entire command's master chief. And I remember going in there and he's like, hey, do you want such and such day off? And I'm like, sure, Master Chief, why? And he's like, well, if I'd like this room painted. And I was like, well, I can paint a room, no problem. And he was like, I don't want it painted just, I want it perfect. He was like, I want it taped off. I want this. I want that. I don't want any
You don't use
splashes.
tape.
The first thought that goes through my head is Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, and Patrick. And I'm thinking, fuck, I'm going to mess this up. I'm going to screw it up. But you can get a little bit of spit on this shit and it comes off. Needless to say, I dropped some paint on the floor. I tried to get a little spit like your mom or dad would do, and it made it worse. It didn't do anything.
Oh no.
Yeah, and then I found out that we had paint thinner, and paint thinner helped really well. So I don't know
Okay,
if
good.
Krabs was spitting on paint thinner, but I gotta let you know that those little life stories that I was learning in SpongeBob, some of them didn't help me.
They did not know.
No, they didn't. So we've been going for about an hour and a half, and I'm already going to tell you, I would love to have you back on because we covered the pilot and a little bit of the first season.
Sure.
But I feel like we could go a lot deeper with a lot more regular show. But there's some fans' questions and some questions that I wrote down, and a couple that I gave you a little what's it called, pregame, I think is what the kids beforehand. So those two. Your Mount Rushmore, right? You get 4 people plus 1 as an honorable mention. Who's on Paula Spence's Mount Rushmore of animators?
Okay. I will say I really want to work with JG again. I miss working with him. It was hard for me to not go back to Close Enough after I did the first season and the development stuff. And then it was done for a while and I had to go find another job. And by the time they started doing Close Enough again, I was in the shorts department at Cartoon Network, and it was a really good opportunity for me. And it would open up the possibilities of me going and kind of advancing in my career beyond art director. So when JG asked me to come back, I was like, oh, I can't. But I was able to then recommend Jessica, who I mentioned before, and she took over as art director for me. And they had such a good relationship that I don't think they missed me. Hopefully they did a little, but I'd really like to work with JG again. For me, it's more about me having a great time working with people that I love, people that I know are doing they know their craft, and I like them on top of it. And those are the people I dream about working with again. If I've worked with them before. I have a good friend named Lindsay Pollard that I worked with on Camp Laszlo, where I met JG and Jessica and Thurup, and I would love to work with her again. We of course are in touch, but I have a friend, let's see, I'd love to work with Chris Siriotis again. We talked about him being this amazing background designer currently on, lately on Kid Cosmic. He's been on so many things. And I've been in the studio with so many of these people that are amazing, there's Gendy, and yes. I don't know if I'm the right fit for Gendy, but Gendy and I shared a common wall, when he was doing Symbiotic Titans, and I was on, I think it was probably Flapjack at the time, I was hearing everything that was going on their show because we didn't have ceilings in our offices at that time. And it's been a pleasure to work around these people, but not necessarily working with them. And JG's or I'm sorry, Gendy's team is so tight.
Yes.
Like it's small. It's a small team of like Scott Wills and
Derek
so
Bachman. Yeah.
yeah, and they're just like so tight that I'm like, I'm very practical and I'm like, oh, I don't know, like I'll just be adjacent,
Mhm.
working with the goofballs,
Yeah.
and those guys are doing like high art almost. I'd love, I think, to work with Craig McCracken, but I don't know if if I'm in his orbit or if he's ever thought of me. I did, I think, pitch a show idea to like for a time. Craig was in the Cartoon Institute, I think, when JG was pitching regular show, and I pitched something that didn't go anywhere. But I think that would be fun working with
Mhm.
Craig. Um, I I have enjoyed my few small short forays into feature, but I like the pressure of working on TV stuff. And so I guess it's just I would like to continue working in TV, and I like meeting new people. So I'm kind of like I really enjoy working with people who I can help, like that I can be the knowledgeable one, like
Yeah.
with JG, and like teach him or somebody that doesn't have as much experience, like the craft of making the shows like below the line,
Mhm.
like we got to stay on schedule, and you guys are doing a lot of animating backgrounds, and like I'm not answering, I'm like weaseling around your question.
Oh no,
I'm not
I like
really
the
answering
explanation.
it.
Nope, I like it.
I like, I guess I'm not one to like set my sights on a superstar. I guess I'd really love to work with JG again. And any of those folks that I worked with on regular show. John Infantino. Um, he is he worked also on Camp Lazlo and
Mhm.
Flapjack, I think, and um regular show for a while, and then he's off, like he's at Nickelodeon right now, I think, and we cross each other's paths once in a while, and I'm always so happy to see him, but we haven't found a way to work together. Okay, here's one that I have not gotten to work with since Laszlo, and then I worked on Rocco's Modern Life Static Cling with
Mhm.
him and Cosmo Segerson. We talked about him before. When he started working on Cuphead with Dave Wasson, they asked me to come and be art director. And at the time, like same thing as with JG on Close Enough, I was on shorts, and they just could not make me an offer good enough to get me to jump onto that one. But that one would have been so challenging and fun working with those two. And I was sorry I didn't take that.
They didn't
Because
send Don Corleone to you, huh? They couldn't make you an offer you could refuse.
they they couldn't.
Mhm.
When Netflix started out, they were throwing money around like crazy. But I think by the time Cuphead came around, Dave and Cosmo might have been making big dollars, but they they couldn't make me an offer that was competitive with what I was getting already. And I had just started in shorts. I had been there for maybe a year
Yeah.
at Cartoon Network, and I felt like there was so much more that I needed to do where I was, and I did not go over to Cuphead, and I regret not being able to work with Cosmo and Dave, and I hope that I can work with the two of them someday. I've worked with Cosmo before. I want to do it again, and I'd love to work with Dave.
I gotta,
There, I answered it.
yeah, there you go. I gotta imagine it happen. You put it out in the universe, man. I gotta imagine something will happen from it.
Yeah.
Like I said, Dave's been on the show, and he's such a cool dude. Um, when I do these podcasts, you never know what to expect with the guests you're going to have on. Usually within the first 5 minutes or so, I can kind of tell how the conversation is going to go. Whether I'm going to have to pull stories, I'm going to have to wrap this shit up quick. I can do a little bit longer format, relax, kind of like what we're doing now. And I enjoy these ones where the guests get on and want to talk and enjoy talking and telling stories. Because if there's one thing I love to be able to do, it's just to be tell me more stories, because I love that type of stuff. I
Good.
love hearing what you guys do, because we see the final project. Sometimes we'll see, rough shit where you guys are putting out, this is something new in production we're just working on now. You'll do like little sneak peek stuff like that. For the most part, we get everything polished, ready to go. This network's behind it. They're rolling it out. So getting to hear, how you came up with a background, why the Ducks were doing what they were doing, why the Trans Am, why there was mullets, all of this shit. I enjoy this type of stuff. So, and the fans don't really get to hear too much of this stuff because nobody buys DVDs anymore. And when you do buy DVDs, they have a very small, I love buying DVDs because of the director's cut, getting to hear the creators, the writers, the artists talk and explain a scene. And you're like, oh fuck, I never thought about it that way. I was looking at it from this way. They broke it down and it makes way more sense than the bullshit I was thinking about. So I love, like I said, this is what this is for me. It's the director's cut.
Yeah.
So like I said, I go imagine it once it's out there, it'll happen. You'll get to work with Dave. You'll get to work with Cosmo. Fuck, man, Dave, Cosmo, and JG all might come together, and then Gendy produces it. Who fucking knows? It'd be like the greatest thing ever.
That would be the greatest.
But nonetheless, so we got your Mount Rushmore. The next one is 2 books that you think any fan of animation or anybody working in animation should have on their shelves.
Okay. The first one is, I'm not going to mess around. You've heard it a million times. It's The Illusion of Life. Mm-hmm. Everybody needs to peruse that book. And then, so the second one, I'm deeply embarrassed that I cannot tell you about the authors, but this series of books, and maybe you know about them, How to Think When You Draw by Lorenzo, and his last name, I believe, is Etherington. My God, let me look it up. I feel like I don't know very much about these folks, and I very recently discovered this. Yes, it's the Etherington Brothers book. Okay. There are multiple volumes, and these guys do like Kickstarters. They're in England. I don't think that they necessarily work in animation, but the book is just filled with these, like, this is the table of contents. There's character design, chapter 1. They talk about how to draw shoes.
Oh, that's really cool. So it's like little exercises and shit.
Yeah, and like here's what feet look like, and here's some examples of different poses. And it's just like almost like half reference packet and half art lesson. Like, this is how hands move, and they're amazing. You and I can connect on how to find these books, but the way I found them is I was trying to help one of my effects designers on Little Demon to draw better smoke. And I was like, just Googling smoke effects, animation, and they have a lesson on drawing smoke. And I was like, what is this? And I saved it. It was just like this strip of, a section of a page. And they just put those things out, and they appear on people's like Pinterest pages. And that's how I found it. And then I mentioned it to one of the prop designers on Little Demon, who said, yeah, they got a Kickstarter and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what? And I happened to get on their Kickstarter or their website at the right time. Mm-hmm. You can basically sign up be on their email list for their website. Yeah. And then when they do a new Kickstarter, they did a Kickstarter for that. They were going to re-release all of the volumes of this book. And I don't know what the hell I did. I think I paid about $500 to get about a dozen books, and they all just came like in the last couple of weeks.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
I haven't even had a chance to look at them much, but that is something I would recommend getting into and exploring. It's
Absolutely.
not necessarily animation, but it's really great for drawing and for people that want to get into animation or are already in and need a little help.
Yeah, it's honing that craft, it's mastering that craft.
Mhm.
The next one is actually how we linked up, man. That's the animation recommendation. Robert Alvarez, national treasure, one of my favorite human beings in the world,
Me
says,
too.
I've got a couple people you need to talk to. You need to talk to Randy Myers and you need to talk to Paula Spence. So
Ah,
we're turning that question on you. Who is going to be Paula's animation recommendation? Who should we try to get on the show?
well, I definitely think you should try to get JG, and I will try to hook you up.
Oh, man, that'd be
I think it
lovely.
would be awesome for you to also get Cosmo. Have already had Dave, so
Yep.
having Cosmo Segerson. I also think John Infantino, who I brought up, would be awesome.
I actually reached out to him.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, 2 years ago. He said he was extremely busy.
he, you could try it again and say, I just had Paula on my podcast and
I'll
she
name drop the
recommended
shit
you
out of you.
again. Because we like each other
Yeah.
and I did him a solid
Yeah.
recently.
Oh, you got to be careful with those solids.
I know.
Be careful.
He had somebody reach out to him through there was a loose connection and some connections being made, and he emailed me and said, hey, could you talk to this person? She's looking for this. And it was like just help with it. She was actually a social worker, like
Yeah.
helping people who find pathways into work.
Mhm.
And this person that she was helping, a young woman, she wanted to help her make some connections in animation.
Yeah.
And she had some very specific questions. And John put her in touch with me. He asked me, would you mind talking to her? And I was like, sure. And I had a fantastic time talking with her. And so you could float my name to John and see if he would remember that and go, well, if Paula did it, maybe I can make some time.
I'll see what I can
But
do.
maybe he'll be really busy, and he really is.
Oh,
He,
100%.
he keeps busy, and then he's always like developing more and more and more. I would really love to work with John again.
That's another name. That's another
And
executive producer right there.
I'd love to hear him on your show too.
All right, we'll take this clip and we'll send it to him. All right, so the next ones, I actually got one of your old cohorts here to write in. Bill Salyers, man. I got to pull up the old, what's it called? The old email. So he wrote in because I reached out to him and said, hey, I got Paula coming on. Any cool stories? I usually do this with everybody that I have on. If I have somebody on that's been recommended, like, what's a cool story that I should bring up that probably won't come up in the conversation? And then he had a really nice email to say. He said, oh, that's great. I didn't get to hang out with Paula as much as I would have liked because we worked on different parts of the process, but she was always delightful. Ask her about the time several of us went to Sleep No More in New York when the network had us up there for some event.
Yep. Okay. This is totally bad for podcasting, but I'm going to step away and I'm going to grab something that is off screen.
Oh, you're perfectly fine.
I'll be back in a moment. This is one of my favorite things about Bill as well. Okay. So Sleep No More in New York. Have you been?
I have not.
It is, and I hesitate to call it interactive, but it is an event. You go to watch this play, but you're not staying in one place. The group from Cartoon Network. This was that same trip I mentioned before with that Jessica came on, and it was my first time to Comic-Con, and I said, what are we all going to do? Like, there's like 15 of us going from Cartoon Network. So what are we going to do? And everybody was like, what? And I said, well, we're going to do something as a group, aren't we? And they're like, are we? What? I don't know. We don't generally do that. And Jessica came up with the idea to go to Sleep No More. And so basically it takes place at the McKittrick Hotel, which is not a hotel. It's in the meatpacking district and it's in a warehouse. And it's like 5 floors of event space. One of the floors is like a speakeasy. And then you go to that floor and you are taken into the event space in small groups, and they would generally put you in an elevator, and an operator gives you a little spiel, a little story as they take you up and down in this elevator, and they let you out, and you might be in there with your friend Jessica, and they open the door and Jessica walks out, and then an arm comes down and you are still in the elevator. They separate your group. I forgot to mention that they also put a mask on you. So you are wearing something like this. This is my mask from going to Sleep No More with Jessica and Bill. This is very creepy in the dark. So everybody that you're with is wearing that mask. You're given that mask as they walk you in, and then you're released on one of the floors. And you don't know where the hell you are. And there are 2 different storylines going on. One of them is based on the play Macbeth, which you should not say in that theater space, but you can say it outside. You're not supposed to say Macbeth within the theater. And then the other play is related, but it's in a different time period, and the actors are crossing over, and they're in both plays. There's no dialogue. So nobody's talking. You're not supposed to be talking, and you're wearing a mask, and then the actors are running around and you just follow them. Oh my God, some naked guy just ran by, I guess I'll run after him and see where he's going. Well, in 5th grade, my class put on the play Macbeth. So I knew the story and I knew what I was looking for. And I came across some guys who were playing poker, and I realized who they were. And I thought, one of these dudes is about to get killed. So I am going to follow him when he leaves. And I followed him, and I saw Macbeth murder him. Spoiler alert, in case you haven't read that Shakespeare play. But so I followed that story. So we did this. We sent an email before we went to Comic-Con and said, hey, you're going to Comic-Con. So some of us are going to go see Sleep No More. And if you want to get in on this, we'll buy tickets. So we got everybody tickets. The head of the studio loved it. Brian Miller, you've had him on your podcast. So
very nice man.
He got into it. I was super happy that he was into it. He took us all to dinner that night, and then we all went to see Sleep No More. This was a Saturday night, and then maybe it was a Friday night, I'm not sure. And then the next day we did Comic-Con, and then Jessica and I decided we should go see it again. And Bill hadn't made it in time to see it on that first night. So he agreed, he wanted to go. We talked about it with him, and somebody else was there on the trip. I can't remember who hadn't gotten to go on that first night. And so we got tickets and we saw it again. And that's the night that Bill went. And I had just been there, a night or 2 before. And there is, so Bill may or may not remember this. This may be why he's telling you to ask me about it. But there is a location within one of these 5 floors that is an apothecary's shop. And it's got all these like herbs and remedies. And there happens to be a big jar of hard candy. And I saw this there, and I'm like, what's that doing there? It's like out of, place, but it was there. And I saw one of the people in the play, one of the actors take them and give some candy to, one of the people standing around in masks. And I was like, oh, okay. I forgot to mention, there are moments in the play when one of the actors may grab you and pull you off stage. Like one of my coworkers who went that first night, Curtis Leelash, he is in a development executive. He came out stunned from the first night, and he's got his mask up here, right? And then he's telling us that he got pulled aside by this actress who pulled him into a bathroom, and then she started speaking to him, and it was a set bathroom, but that's the only time you hear dialogue. It is if somebody pulls you out and they are speaking nonsense to you, right? It happened to me the next night when I went, but Curtis is sitting there with that mask on his head, and he's like, oh my gosh, she took my mask off and she was talking to me and she was all freaked out. And then she put my mask back on and she kissed me on the forehead. And I'm like, put your mask on, Curtis. And he like pulls it down, and he had a big lipstick mark on his forehead of his mask. But that freaked him out even more. So the next night when we went back, and it was Bill, and I think that Sam might have been there too that night. I came across that candy jar again, and I'm like, well, I'm taking some of that candy. So I had the candy in my hands, and I was messing with people. So like I might be in a room just alone because the acting has passed on, and I'm standing there and, looking around at the scenery, and people would come in and they look a little scared because they don't recognize you or anybody. And I would just use this freako mask and just be like I'd approach them and they didn't know what I was doing. I was freaking them out. And then I would like hand them a piece of candy, and they were like, oh my God. So what happens at the end of this play is that everybody is eventually guided to the same final location, which is the finale of the play Macbeth, which is a banquet scene, and there is a behead, there's a death, and so everybody kind of gets guided by like doors close and rooms are no longer there, and it's so beautifully planned that you don't even realize what's happening, but everybody's guided to the last moment, and there's a big crowd in this room, and I saw Bill and recognized him because he's quite tall, or whatever the case was. I recognized him in the room, and I slipped up behind him, and I had my last piece of candy, and I just quietly slid it into his hand and passed on. And he looked at me like he did not recognize me. He just looked over and was freaked out. And then we watched the end of the play, and we had made special reservations that cost a little extra, and we got a little extra in the play as part of that, but we also got a table reserved for us at the speakeasy, so we were all meeting back at the table, and Bill was like super excited to be there. And like I went and met them, we were all gathered around our table having drinks, and he was, well, funnily enough, we ended up talking about like union stuff, because he was concerned about, are these actors equity people? Like, are they getting paid union wages? Like, this is a tough play to put on. And he goes, oh my God, this freaky lady put a piece of candy in my hand and I didn't know what to do. And I was laughing. I'm like, that was me, Bill. And yeah, Bill is a great guy. He is so fun and funny, and he's just, on top of it, such a good person. Like the fact that he was worried about these actors, like whether they were getting paid the good wages to be in this play. Such a smart man, very thoughtful. And I know that your podcast was great with him, and I think he brought so much to regular show, and it was a pleasure. The few times when I could see him and JG working together, I didn't get to go to the records very much, but they were great working together.
I knew he was a good person when I can't remember. He was sitting down and he said he was eating eggs because I asked him what one of his favorite fan experiences was, and we were talking about Mark Hamill, obviously voicing Skips. So he was like, Mark Hamill is a hero. He's Luke Skywalker, for God's sakes. He was like, he's every kid's my age hero. And then he was telling me that he stood in line, paid his hard money to go meet Mark, a guy that he works with. He wanted his signature. And he was like, the next day at Comic-Con, I was sitting there and then I was just sitting down. I was eating my eggs and stuff. He was like, I was out there with the people. And then he was like, this mom had brought her two kids to meet somebody. And they didn't show up or the line was too long. Something happened. And then he overheard it. And he was like, hey, do you guys like regular show? And then they're like, yeah, weird guy eating your eggs. And then he was like, well, I'm Rigby. I'll give you an autograph, I'll give you a picture. He's like, I know you didn't get to meet the guy you wanted to, or whatever it was, the story he told us, but he was like, he went out of his way to be very kind to kids that were kind of bummed that they didn't get to meet whoever it was, they got to meet. So once he told me that story, I was like, oh man, you're such a good fucking person, Bill. So I love hearing stories like that.
Yeah, he is. Do you want to hear my Mark Hamill story?
I would love to hear your Mark Hamill story.
I told you before that I am very bad with faces, and like I'm Googling people that go, do I know them? Oh yeah, I know that person. And I hate it when I don't remember somebody that I've actually worked with. But so one day on regular show, we were, it must have been our first or second season because we were still in a certain place, part of the studio where we later moved from. And I went to talk to my producer and I was in her office. She had this couch that, hello. She had this couch where people would just come and sit on the couch and chat forever. And I was in there talking with her, not sitting down yet, but I was telling her that my cat had just died when I had this old cat Beast, and he was 18 and we had to put him to sleep. He was just so old, he wasn't eating anymore. And so I had missed the day before, or I had gone home from work early or something. And so I was in the office talking with her about this, and this man walks in and here's the story, and he's like, oh, we had to put one of my dogs to sleep, and he had West Highland White Terriers. And so I know he's there for the recording studio, which was right next to the producer's office. And so we're all talking about all this, and he's just talking about what a bummer it was. The dog's part of the family, and he's got 2 dogs, and now he's got 1, and blah, blah, blah. And he leaves, and I look at Janet Diamond was the producer, and I go, was that Mark Hamill? And she goes, you fucking dipshit. Of course it was. And I was like, I'm not good with faces. And he doesn't look like Luke Skywalker anymore. Come on now. So that's my Mark Hamill story. By the time we got to the end of regular show, I think that last movie was coming out, or maybe the second to the last movie, and he was going to play a part, and he was getting a lot of publicity, and he had to be more careful, coming into the studio. And it's like, don't talk to him. His agent had to get in touch with the recording studio and say, manage this so people don't bug him, because people were, going ape shit. It's Mark Hamill. And here I am like, I don't even know who you are, dude. I mean, this was at the beginning of regular show when I had this conversation with him. And then later on, it was a little bit of a bummer to have him, to hear from JG, oh yeah, people aren't supposed to talk to him and bug him. And I was like, oh, well, I'd go ask him about his dog. I know he's a caring person. But it's got to be hard. I can't imagine being that famous. But still, even when you're that famous, like
To be
some
that
dipshits don't recognize you.
and to be that famous and that kind, like you always hear stories about how kind of a person he is. And it's just, it really goes to show you. They always say, don't meet your heroes. I've only met one person that I considered a hero, and he was an asshole. And it was at a
Oh,
con. I won't say the name. I'll tell you.
okay.
I'll tell you off air. However, I really feel like everybody deserves at least one. That's a lie. Two people I've met in my life, and the one I'll say online, or one I'll say here, it's Jameer Nelson. He was the point guard for the Orlando Magic. We were like 16, right? Whenever they were going to try to sell tickets, you'd have an open house at the arena. You get to go down there and meet the players. They'll sign your basketball, or sign their basketball card. What are they? They'll take a picture with you, shit like that. It's just to sell tickets
Yeah.
and meet the people and everything like that. So I go down there, and then the two big guys at the time were Jameer Nelson, our point guard, and Dwight Howard, our center. And those guys were only there to take pictures for the people that would buy season tickets. The other guys on the team, they were there for whatever. So
Oh,
my coach ended up buying a season ticket or a half season or some shit like that for him and his son. And then so he earned a basketball photo with or a photo with Dwight Howard. So the whole team got a photo. It's somewhere upstairs in my old office. And Jameer Nelson was just walking around, and he wasn't really doing anything. So I go up to him and I'm like, "Hey, Mr. Nelson, I'm a real big fan. Buddy Larry here's a real big fan. Can we get your autograph?" Turns around, looks at us, and then turns back around. I'm like, huh, maybe he didn't hear me. So I tap him on the shoulder again.
uh-oh.
And he like fucking snatched the ball out of my hand and like did a really quick signature, and then like didn't forcibly give me the ball back, but he definitely did not give me back the ball very nicely. And I'm like, man, fuck this dude. Flash forward 2019. 2018, somewhere in 2018, 2019. The restaurant I was working at the time, they were in really tight with the Orlando Magic president. He would come into the restaurant all the time. He still goes into that restaurant all the time. And they had hired us to go out there and work their club, their expensive club, to do some catering and shit like that. We go there, and then two things happened. I completely changed my mind about him, and then
Oh,
I got to meet like my Michael Jordan essentially as Tracy McGrady, but I'll get to that one in just a second. I see Jameer Nelson, and then usually with something like that, it was our first playoff series in quite some time. It was the year the Toronto Raptors won the title, and I think we're playing the Bucks, or we might have been playing. No, we were playing the Raptors because my buddy got fired because we went to that game, and he's like, "I'm not coming into work." No call, no showed. Went to the game, and got fired. So it was the Raptors. So we're there at the first game, and then I see Jameer Nelson, and then I'm watching him from afar. I've got this notion in my head that fuck this dude. He was an asshole to me over 15 years ago, whatever it was. Fuck this dude. But I'm just sitting back and I'm watching him. Watching how he operates, watching how he moves, watching how watching how he treats people. I'm glad that was empty. Watching him how he treats people. And he was nice to everybody. Every fucking kid that came up to him, he was signing their jersey. He was teaching them stuff. He was talking to them. And then made me think. I was like, man, maybe he was just having a bad fucking day at that time. Maybe,
yeah.
maybe he had a friend that passed away, a dog that he had to put down, a cat that he had to put down. Maybe he just wasn't fucking feeling good. Maybe he just had a bad fucking day that day. And I completely dropped my grudge. He doesn't know I have a fucking grudge against him he doesn't even remember me,
Yeah.
So I completely dropped it. And I started thinking, man, maybe everybody gets one bad day when you try to meet somebody that's your hero and shit, And then the other guy I met at a Comic-Con, he was just a real dick. I asked him a question. He's like, I've answered that enough. You can go and find it on any YouTube channel. And I was like, dude, I literally waited in line for fucking 2 hours for you to sign my comic book. I left my comic book on the table. I was like, fuck this book and fuck you. And I walked away. At that point, I was like, man, I had to stand behind the smelliest person in the world for 2 hours to come and talk to you. And all I had was one simple question. You could have told me, but maybe he was having a bad day too, but still, fuck that guy. I'm never going to buy that comic book again, but nonetheless,
yeah. He should probably stop going to Comic-Cons.
He's a very he's an older comic book. I don't want to put his name out there because I don't
You
want
don't need to.
Yeah. But nonetheless, so those were some of the fans' questions, or that was one of the fans' questions, Bill and mine, and then we got a couple more. All right, okay. So A couple of these ones I came up with, and a couple of the other ones are some of the fans ones that wrote in, and I want to pick your brain a little bit. The first one is I used this one for Toby because I thought it was really, really fun, and he said he would not give me an answer because he didn't want to offend anybody. But it's not offending. It's not offending anybody. He just didn't want to leave anybody off the list. All right. So if you, Paula, had the money to put down on a animation studio, you were going to start an animation studio. You have to have a writer, a director, an animator, and a voice actor, and somebody to create the show. You're art directing. Who's your writer? Who's your creator? Who's your director? Who's your writer? Who's your animator? And who's your voice actor? This could be dead or alive, any point in time that's ever worked in animation.
Oh my gosh.
The hard-hitting question.
Only one of each of these?
Yep.
Oh. Okay. Oh my God. Am I going to be lame if I say I want JG to come on?
Absolutely not.
Okay. I'm going to ask JG to come on and do his magic. And then I'm going to collaborate with him on the other names. And you mentioned Matt Price before, and I really miss working with him.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen him on, occasional like Reno 911 or The Office. Like every once in a while, I see his episodes of those shows, but I'd love to have maybe Matt or John Infantino in. I want Robert Alvarez to be the animation director. I also love, I mentioned my friend Lindsay Pollard. She has done the same thing as Robert, and now she is doing episodic directing. If I can get her, that would be awesome too. I'm going small time, like reunion stuff instead of like
that's perfectly fine. That's your list.
Come true. It's my own animation studio though, so I can do whatever the fuck I want.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I have a lot of money, right?
Oh, you absolutely do. You can get any voice actor, and you get a voice actor and animator left.
The voice actors. I mean, really, I love Bill. I gotta say, I love Bill. And you know who is also really funny that I just worked with more recently? But if I could only have one, then I'm gonna have Bill because I know he's a delight. But if Bill's not available, then I just did this show, Little Demon, with Danny DeVito, and his daughter, Lucy DeVito, played his daughter on the show, Chrissy, and he played Satan. And they were both just a joy to work with. Like, he's very kind, she's very kind, and they're, Danny's son, Jake, is a producer, and they were really great to work with. They have their own production company, Jersey Films. So I probably don't have to hire them. I could just like collaborate with them and then save my spots for the other people that I wanted to work with.
That perfectly works. And then you got one more.
Okay.
You got an animator. What animator you bring?
Oh, animator.
And Danny DeVito is Frank, and Always Sunny is one of the best anythings ever.
I can't even handle his Jersey Mike's commercials. I love them so much. Do you see those in Florida?
Yeah.
Okay, I love those.
We get the Brad Garrett.
I stop. That's the only commercials I stop and watch. Okay, can I say Cosmo?
Absolutely.
I mean, he's a director, showrunner. He's a wonderful designer as well. But I think I could have him as an animator, right?
Absolutely. This is
Cosmo.
All right.
He draws so well. His drawing style is so confident and beautiful. And yeah.
If you could go back in time and be a fly on the wall for the creation of any cartoon character, who would it be and why? Any cartoon character that's ever been created. You get to see the creation. Which one you going back in time and seeing?
Okay, I'm not going to say Walt Disney because I'm still pissed at him that he's a union buster. So I kind of want to go back to, this is just going back to my childhood and what I loved. Either Super Chicken or George of the Jungle.
Yeah.
Is that dumb?
No, it's not, man. It's J Ward Productions right there.
I mean, I think they were made at the same studio, so maybe they were made around the same time. If I was a fly on the wall, I might have caught several conversations. But and maybe I'm just gonna say Super Chicken. It's
Yeah,
such a dumb ass cartoon, like ding dong. But I still, are you familiar with Super Chicken?
I am.
I still like when people are complaining, especially if it's parents complaining about how hard it is to have kids. I think I can still hear Super Chicken saying, "You knew the job was dangerous when you took it." And I'm gonna pick that.
I got a book recommendation for you. You might like it. You might have already read it. The Moose That Roared. Have you read that one? It's the J Ward.
No, I've heard of it, but I have not read it, and I'm writing it down.
Before the Disney Revolt by Jake S. Friedman. That one was my favorite animation book. And the one I'm reading now, I've actually got it upstairs. It's The Rise and Fall of UPA by Adam Abraham. And I'm reading that one now. That one's pretty good so far.
Okay.
But yeah, The Moose That Roared, that book is so good. It details everything from the start inception of Jay Ward and then obviously the decline. I didn't realize that through the entire production of Rocky and Bullwinkle, the reason it looked so bad is because it was all animated down in Mexico. They didn't
Uh-huh.
have the skill, they didn't have the supplies, but Hollywood didn't want to put money into it, so they used the Mexican art studio or the animation studios down there to do all of this. And then the
Yeah.
reason Tarzan looks so good is because it was animated in LA and they threw everything at the wall, money, everything they could to make it look so good. I think it only lasted 1 or 2 seasons possibly. And then I learned after reading that one, they created Captain Crunch. Jay Ward, I didn't know that, it's just like, wow, this is my favorite cereal. And then it's
They
the
brought in the bacon, I guess, with Captain
people.
Crunch.
Yeah, it's just, well, that's how they made all of the money and kept the lights on for the longest time. That was
Yeah.
like the last, death throes essentially of that studio, was
Yeah.
Captain Crunch. And it's just fascinating to learn like all of these things. Like, fuck, dude, why isn't this? You should be able to fucking learn how to balance a checkbook, and you should know animation history in high school. This is bullshit. I didn't learn shit in high school. You know what I mean? But
It
yeah, so
is
that's a
really
really good book.
surprising that the money stuff, like kids animation, the budgets are so much lower than adult animation. It's weird. The pay is higher in general for adult animation. I'm like, why is that? It's not any easier or harder. And it's because the advertising budgets are higher.
Yeah,
Like it doesn't pay to advertise to kids, so they don't have as much to spend. And I'm like, dang, that sucks. And when I hear about what goes on, like especially after this Warner Brothers Discovery merger and all of the cost cutting and stuff, and it's
yeah,
like, oh, you're going to take all the cartoons off of HBO Max so you can find another place to show them because you want to make some money. You want somebody to pay you for those properties rather than showing them for free on HBO Max that people are paying to watch, but you're not making enough off of these cartoons. So you're going to sell them to Amazon Prime or something to like, I was just saying this morning, like, when do the consumers start to say like, oh, by cutting those costs and making things better for your shareholder, your stockholder, you're actually looking for ways to make the consumer pay more for them. like,
absolutely. Everybody's got a
like,
streaming service these days.
oh, dang.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
just and I won't stay too long on this topic, but it's just like, did you get a chance to watch Velma?
oh, I haven't seen it yet. I just saw a commercial for it, actually, right before I came in to chat with you.
So it's not good. I try to be
Oh,
as positive as I can on this show. The only thing that I enjoy, and I watched the first episode and the last 7 minutes, I was like, I'm fucking done. I can't do it. It's like I gave it an honest, I I took an edible and I let it kick in enough. Because Scooby-Doo is very important to everybody.
I loved it.
It's one of those things that it's a perfect show. And then when you talk to people that worked on that show, I talked to Bob Singer, he worked on that show, and he was like, it was one of the hardest things I've ever worked on. He was like, trying to get
Oh,
Scooby-Doo down, just drawing it was hard. He was like, everything was so brilliantly done. He was like, but the production on it was hard because of how fast they had to move on that show. But you have these characters, and then I've got no problem. You want to gender flop, race swap. I don't care as long as it makes sense. Just make it make sense. Don't just we have this thing in the kitchen that my chef always says. Don't just do something just to do it. It's got to have some kind of reasoning behind it, right? And as long as that is a standard that people can push, I'm all for it. So I went into it with an open mind because I like the girl that plays her, Mindy. I can't pronounce her last name, and I don't want to offend
Kayling.
anybody
I
if
think it's just Kayling.
Kayling, yeah. So I think she's fucking hilarious. I like my wife watched that show, fuck,
The
Mindy. I
Mindy
think it was
Project.
Mindy. Yeah, so I thought that show was funny as hell. I was like, I was all for it. And then the best thing about the show was the art. The animation style is great. They have these little flashbacks where it's this demon creeping up on her and she has these visions. If you watched Wednesday, it's kind of like that where she premonition or whatever. And that whole sequence is cool. But the best thing about the entire show was Fred. And he was just a straight frat boy douche. Right. It's just like Velma comes up to him and he was like, "Do I know you?" And she's like, "Yeah, we've been in school forever. We had this team, Scooby-Doo. We were solving mysteries. Yeah, my doctor diagnosed me with this thing where I can't remember ugly people." And he was like, "Yeah, that's just called being rude." And that's what she tells Fred. And it's just like this very pretentious guy. And I think he's fucking hilarious, right? Because he's just a dipshit. Is He's not a very bright character. He's very vain. He's everything you would think looking at the way Fred looks. You're like, oh, he's probably a douche, right? And then they play into that stereotype, and he's the
I
best part of the
see.
show. It's just nothing was fun about it. Like I was going into it hoping that it was going to be fun, and then it's just like, oh, you had something here. You could have done adult animated Scooby Doo, and you drop the ball. It's just for me. I'm pretty sure there's people out there that will absolutely love it. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get fucking shit on in the comments when this one goes live. Like, oh, you're a fucking idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. Probably. It's just not for me. I try not to shit on anything because I can't do what you guys do. And it's not fair to shit on something that you can't do. But
It's sometimes it's hard to get through, like, okay, well, I can't complain much getting paid to draw or paint or, have fun, try to make people laugh, but it's much more pleasant and enjoyable when you're working on a show that's a good quality,
yeah.
and personally, I like the shows I'm on to just have some joy in it.
Yeah.
Like there were some episodes of Flapjack that got a little unnecessarily dark. I mean,
Mhm.
and I was like, I don't like the way that episode's going. And one time there was an episode of SpongeBob, like in the third season. It was a show called Pressure, and all of the main characters ganged up on Sandy Cheeks, and
Mhm.
I don't like Sandy, but I also don't like bullying. And I talked about it in a meeting. We were doing like an art approvals meeting, and I was like, I don't like this episode. I don't like the way it's going with these. SpongeBob wouldn't do that to Sandy. I'm like, and Patrick wouldn't do it. Squidward, maybe, but I'm like, I don't like it. I don't like seeing the characters doing that. And then Steve Hillenburg said something to me. And he said that it was either the art director or that it was probably the creative director told Derek Dryman told him um, what I had said. And he's like, so Steve asked me more about it, how I felt about that episode. And I said, I don't think SpongeBob would do that. It's mean spirited and he's not mean spirited. And even if he would do it, I don't think it's funny. And they changed that episode.
That's really cool.
It's still pressure and there's still some bad feelings in it, but it's not like it was before.
Well,
And
that's
I and
good.
I think Steve heard me. Steve Hillenburg was, oh my gosh, can I bring him back to You told
Absolutely.
me living or dead. Okay, I want Steve in that.
So I got to imagine you worked with them. So I do this every chance I get when somebody comes up that's no longer here. Tuck Tucker is one of my favorite people
Oh,
that I have ever gotten to hear stories. I just did Craig Bartlett, creator of Hey Arnold, a Dinosaur Train. And he told me one of the funniest stories I've ever heard. Tuck Tucker was working on Hey Arnold, and he had the communal refrigerator, and his sandwich kept getting eaten and stolen. So Tuck Tucker and Craig goes, I don't know if it was a Bruno shit. And ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know what Bruno is, Bruno was Tuck Tucker's dog, his hunting dog. So Tuck Tucker went and literally made a shit sandwich, wrapped it up just like a regular sandwich, says do not eat, do not touch Tuck Tucker's. And somebody took his shit sandwich. And after that moment, Tuck Tucker never had a sandwich go missing again. So anytime we get to do this, I enjoy this. I do this. I've done it with Tuck Tucker, Steve Vixton, which was another guy that's no longer here that I wish was still here. Christine Cavanaugh is no longer here. James Avery, Uncle Phil, and he was the voice of Shredder and Ninja Turtles. So what's your favorite Stephen Hillenburg story? You got one that sticks out, or maybe an interaction, a meeting, or anything like that?
it's very short. And it is not going to be that interesting or meaningful for anybody else but me, probably. But I asked him what he wanted to do, what he wanted me to do on a certain background. Like, how do you want me to draw this? I don't remember anything about the drawing. I don't remember the episode, but I just asked him, like, how do you think I should do this? And he said, well, how do you want to do it? And I said, well, it's your show. And he said, well, it's your show too. So do it however you want. And I was like, okay. So I did it however I wanted. And I remembered that. I mean, I knew him outside on, got to know him and spent a little time with him outside of work as well, and his wife. And he was a very kind person.
Yeah.
Another, I have thought of that when I've been on other shows. When the creator's getting a little bit too big for his britches,
A little prima
let's
donna.
say. And I'm not going to say who, but we have talked about the show tonight, and you can probably guess it's not JG, but this person worked with Steve, and may have had some insecure feelings about how much Steve succeeded in his life. And I thought of Steve then while I was working with that person again, and thinking, man, if I told him that story about Steve saying that, it's your show, Paula, too. It's your show too, Paula. Like, this guy would blow his top if I brought up a Steve Hillenburg story and that was it. Like, but you get through those shows too. It's much more pleasant to work with someone like Steve, who is collaborating and cares about what other people think on their show. And then one other slightly sad story about Steve is, I grew up in Huntington Beach, which is on the Pacific Ocean, and it's in Orange County, and it's a nice place. They're famous for surfing, and it's very clean beach, beige sands, and then just down the beach is Newport Beach, where I was born. I remember at the time working with Steve, and I worked on the first 3 seasons only of SpongeBob, and then a little bit on that first movie, only for like a month, and a little bit here and there, and recently got back to it. But those first 3 seasons were great, but it was a crapshoot, what was going to be good. We didn't know it was going to be the hit it became of that first season before it was even on. And then they started coming out with the crap, the merchandise. Like, there was going to be like Burger King Happy Meal, figures or something. And we were all like, Burger King, it's not McDonald's. Ooh, it's second rate or whatever. And like,
Yeah.
and talking about, the other products that they were going to come up with. And Steve was really sensitive about all of that stuff and worried about like overconsumption and whatever. And you'd think, this guy's income depends on selling more and more crap. But he told me that his worst nightmare would be to see some SpongeBob crap washed up on a beach because he
Yeah.
had that background as a marine biologist. And one year while we were working on those first 3 seasons, there was like this huge, and it must have been it was probably the 3rd season, but there was a big old rainstorm. Like we just recently had a few weeks of rain and it was like, oh my God, we can't handle it here in LA. But right on the front of the LA Times was this photograph, and it was in Huntington Beach or Newport Beach or right on the border where I grew up. And it was just all this trash that had washed up during this storm. And right in the foreground was this rubber ball that had SpongeBob's face. I was like a SpongeBob ball. And I was just like, I brought my newspaper to work every morning when I was on SpongeBob. And I was just like, do not show that to Steve.
Yeah.
Like, I hope he doesn't see that. And I'm sure he didn't remember ever having said anything like that to me, but that I think about that too a lot. Just, when I see, the consumption and overconsumption and over
Saturation. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, he's definitely, like I said, him and Tuk Tuk are probably the 2 hardest ones, because it's, as a kid, you see mainly the creators, or you remember voice actors.
Yeah.
It's not until you get older, if you follow with whatever you follow, whether it's movies, animation, comic books, and you really start knowing and learning about folks like yourself that helped bring Steve's vision to life, Craig's vision to life, Gendy's, JG's, all of these folks' visions to life. That's when you start figuring out, like, oh, this is super collaborative. This is just not just one person. I used to think that the same person that animated it, drew it, colored it, painted it, voiced it, I used to think it was just all the same people when I was younger. And then when I started watching the credits, it's like, man, this is a lot of fucking names.
There's a lot of names. I mean,
Yeah.
in the old days when TV animation was really spreading out, there were fewer people and they were crossing over and doing different jobs. Like maybe they were doing voices, or somebody was storyboarding and then doing backgrounds. But now we're kind of compartmentalized.
Yeah.
But Tuck was pretty great, and I was at the studio when that shit sandwich thing happened. It was real.
Yeah.
Like that. There was, I know that refrigerator. There were several little kitchenettes around the studio, and I actually think of, how when you go through life and you just like, you might see something and you get a flash of the past or something that
Oh, yeah.
it reminds you of something, and I can't walk past that kitchen without thinking about that sandwich.
What a legacy to leave. I'd gotten to hear some really good Tuk Tucker stories. The shit story was probably the best one. And then another one, it was when I had Dave Cunningham on. Dave April Fool's Day was Tuk Tucker's day to shine, is what Dave was saying. He was such a practical joker. And then I think he had taken honey and put it on the inside of Dave's phone. So Tuk Tucker would call him, and
Oh
then
my
Dave would
God.
put it up to there and he'd stick it down, and he'd like, oh, fuck.
Oh God, that would make me so mad.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really fun. Some of the fans' questions we've covered almost all of them, because a lot of them was just talking about the JG's regular show. You did some flapjack talk, so you covered that. So we'll end it with this one. I think this one will be a pretty good one to go out on. I'll give you a choice. Do you want to do a buddy cop question, or do you want to do something that's most impacted you in your career? It's your choice.
Oh my gosh. I can't. I'm flashing on the most impact on my career, so ask me the buddy cop.
Okay.
I'm like, who can what is it? I mean, it's so many smaller moments, like Steve Hillenburg saying that, and Steve Hillenburg also telling me that coat hangers are funny. Like, there's a lot of coat hangers in SpongeBob. Like, there'd be a pile of trash or something. Like, that is one thing that he told me. He thought coat hangers were funny, and I put him in wherever I could for him. So anyway, buddy cop.
Whenever I think of coat hangers, I don't think funny. It's a pretty
They just
dark
don't
thought.
like, they don't belong in a lot of places, and so when they appear there, it could be funny.
Yeah. All right, so we'll end it with this one. So you get two characters to have a buddy cop-esque TV series. Now, when I asked this question to some of the regular show guys, I said you can't take the High Five Ghost Muscle Man combo, and you can't take a Mordecai Rigby combo. So it can be any character you've ever worked on plus another character you've ever worked on, as long as they're not best friends in the show. So no SpongeBob Patrick, Gary SpongeBob. So it'd have to be a yin and a yang.
And they don't necessarily need to be in the same show.
No, you could literally take Flapjack and Mordecai, or you could take Rigby and Gary, or Squidward and I'm blanking, Rocco, so it doesn't have to be, and it can be in the same show if you'd like. They just can't be friends in the show.
I love Rigby.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have Rigby be one of them.
Good cop or bad cop?
Bad cop. Yeah, he's definitely the bad cop. Oh man, I generally like the bad cop characters. Good cop. I mean, Patrick Star might be good for the good cop.
Nothing is getting solved, but that's going to be a funny TV show.
Yeah. How about that? Let's try that. We can always recast later if it doesn't work.
No, that's perfect. Rigby and the Star. Rigbone and the Star.
I also really fucking love Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
Like, he's my all-time favorite. Like, just Bugs Bunny is just so awesome. But I think, I like those characters like that are little shits, that are little assholes, but decent at heart, but don't trust them.
Yeah. They're shady for sure.
Bugs Bunny could maybe be the sergeant that those buddy cops have to report to.
Oh, man, what a
it's
sergeant.
all boys, damn it. Okay. There's not very many girls in cartoons yet. Although I did just spend a good time on Little Demon with some good lady characters.
Have they got a release date for that one yet?
Little Demon got released this August of this year. So if you have Hulu, you can watch it on Hulu.
Well, I've got Hulu. I guess I know what I'm watching tonight.
Yeah, it was on FXX. So in the evening on FX. It's kind of their Adult Swim version of FX. I think it ended up looking a lot better than I thought it was going to, because it was a very big, ambitious show that we did not have the manpower to make it what it was written to be, but it ended up looking great. And I hope it succeeds.
I got to imagine it will. If your name's attached onto it, we've talked about hit after hit after hit that you've worked on. So
I've been
track
very
record
lucky.
is you're hitting on every show. So I'm going to check this one out. Like I said, after we get off here, because I got some work to do anyways. And then I'll put on Little Demons, and you're going to get at least a view ship from me for sure.
Okay.
But like I said, Paul, this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this. Robert, thanks for setting this up. I can't wait to have you back on. We can delve maybe a little bit more into maybe the second episode. We get for
okay.
Stuff like that. But like I said, my guest next week is Ian Jones-Cordy. Enjoy the teaser.
Oh, it was completely surreal, and I remember like my first days there, I just couldn't believe it was happening, like that
Yeah.
I was actually there. Like I remember like walking in and seeing like, um they used to have like a big mural with all the logos of every show they had ever made there, like on the wall. And I remember just looking at that mural and being like blown away, like I can't believe I get to work
Yeah.
here, you know? And I remember when I started there, it was sort of around the time that I think Chowder had just, like, they were just finishing. Flapjack was winding down, but they had like a couple episodes left. And I remember, like, yeah, getting to meet, some of these people who were the people whose shows I had seen, or worked with the people whose shows I had seen. And it was just like, it was mind blowing. And I
Mm.
remember, like, yeah, the point when I was making OKKO and I was like animating the Cartoon Network Studios logo and my characters were in the middle of it. It was just like, it was like mind blowing. Like, like I used to watch this channel like 24/7, and like I'm definitely in the generation that was like really just primed to like all of their original programming when it was starting. Like literally, I think the year we got it was when like What a Cartoon was starting, and like all the stuff that Fred Seibert was doing. And I remember like just actually stepping into that building and like being a part of it was just like, it was mind-blowing. It seriously was.
Did any of it feel fake? Did you feel like you were dreaming at all?
I just remember like it just all moved so fast that I
Yeah.
didn't really have time to think it was fake. I was just like, I can't believe I'm here, you
Hmm.
know? I remember uh I think it was maybe the second season of Adventure Time. We had moved like in the building, and we were actually like across every floor at that time had like two shows on it. And I remember I think like Gendy was starting Symbionic Titan maybe around that time. And I remember just thinking like, I can't believe it. This is like a hero of mine,
Yeah.
like down the hall. You know what I mean? It was surreal. It was really surreal.